matters, including the future urban zone. Welcome, Mr. Byrne. Your second appearance in front of the panel.
It is.
From 2 to 3 weeks ago when you gave us some interesting figures on the spatial planning exercise. We've heard this morning from a number of submitters, including Mr. Bergen, and there might be some overlap, I think, between your submission and his, but we'll hear from that in we have a presentation that's on the screen, and we have handout hard copies of that too. So I'd like to invite you to take us through this at your own pace, and we'll see what questions we have.
Right. Yeah, well, I spoke to Paul. Well, I've only emailed Paul last night, so that's a late development. I did send him a copy of my presentation.
Yes.
I don't know if he got it or not.
He did mention it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd expect to only do one hearing with all three things, but it's the way it's worked out. This is my second of three. So on that first slide, I'm here to oppose the Chamberlain Future Urban Zone, which I call the FUZ from now on, if that's okay.
Right.
And I'm going to provide some reason having that opinion. And secondly, I'm going to try to demonstrate there is alternative land for residential development on the fringes. And
when you say you're opposing the Chamberlain FUZ zone, that's as per the proposed district plan notification.
Yes.
It was subject to a different spatial extent in the draft district plan. Right.
FDA in the draft or something like that, or?
Well, that was in the operative district plan, but in the draft proposed district plan, there was a wider area, I believe, shown for the development area.
In the
FUZ.
Draft, it was wider.
Yes.
Yep.
And then I think it was plan it's been reduced.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bergen has, in relation to his own property at number 29A, he's requested the FUZ zoning be extended over his property.
Yep. Yep. Yes. As I say, we haven't spoken. Right. So obviously, hopefully you will remember my first submission on the belief that there was insufficient development capacity for houses in the proposed plan. So obviously that's at odds with me being here today to say I oppose the FUZ, but I think the loss of development capacity of the FUZ is insignificant compared to what is facing Marston way of planning for more houses. It's maybe 200 houses. When you're looking at a couple of thousand, it's sort of neither here nor there. So I don't think that the loss of the highly productive land is outweighed by the benefit of having 200 houses built slightly closer to Solway Station, which is essentially what's going on here. The probable developer of the FUZ did not provide affordable housing in the first 25 hectares of this development. It chose to maximise profits, and I do understand that. I think they're only selling house and land packages there, not land, and they're in the region of $800,000 plus. I believe that will be likely what would happen if the FUZ went ahead. It would be more expensive houses and not that many of them. So on slide 2, please, Rick.
Done.
With the HPL.
We are indeed.
This is extract, where the fact I'm plucking a single line out of it, and there is more to this than just that. But fundamentally, for Marston, I think it means that LUC3 land, third classification, should be used before LUC2. That's what it says, where practical. And slide 3, well done, Ruth. And again, I'm sorry if this is so well understood. This is at the bottom, it's a land care research map. This is publicly available. If you're a bit smart, you can impose another map on top of it, which I've done. The little blue area is the Marston Urban Zone, which I imported from the proposed plan. And you can see there's almost no level 1 LUC land in the Marston area. It's to the south of Masterton, and it's worth noting that we have chosen to have the Homebush wastewater treatment plant put on the only bit of LUC1 land we have, and we also put the Nursery Road rubbish recycling facility on it. So the next slide, please. So this is showing level LUC1 and 2 and combined, which makes up about 5.2% of the total area in New Zealand. And Marston's got quite a bit more of this. In fact, it's surrounded by it. And yep, so that's level 1 and level 2. And this is level 1s, 2 and 3, which has not turned out well at all, for some reason. It's hardly any difference, but it should, I think that's something to do with the projector. The colour has not come out of the LUC3. But it makes up about 15%. It might look better on your hard copies. I don't know how you deal with this sort of thing, but the national government has signalled that they're removing LUC3 land from the MPS HPL, but it hasn't happened yet because they think to lock up 15% of land, make it unavailable, is going too far. But how you incorporate that into a proposed plan at this stage, I don't know. That's likely to happen mid-year or something. So again, you know, it's relatively easy to take the urban area from one of the LINS maps and impose it on top of the LUC3, 1, 2 and 3 land around Masterton, which is what I've done there. The proposed buzz, hello, on the left, about halfway up. In it for LUC2. Most importantly about this map is that there's almost no area that isn't LUC land 1 to 3 for building on residential houses on around Masterton. I've not found any. There probably is somewhere, but I can't find it. Oh, and well, apart from the white area there, which I've marked as flood because you can't build there for other reasons. So this is a very amateur attempt, I admit. I mean, I'm no planner. I have just superimposed one map on top of another to get that. And you can see the LUC1 land at the bottom.
Yes.
I have done as best I can to find areas of hazards where you can't build. So, for example, on the right, where it's the new lifestyle area is, that's actually a liquefaction risk, so that's not possible to build on. There are others who've made submissions on rezoning significant portions of the LUC3 land that are not in the proposed plan. And for full disclosure, I am one of those submitters.
Okay.
That's why I'm coming here. So my piece of land is at the top there, the 3 in it, the littlest piece.
3, yes.
I pointed out.
Yes, please. And what's the street address for that?
47 Oak Street.
Oak.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one there.
Purely by luck, the LUC2 land goes around my place. And I've always known that. So I did submit the draft stage asking for that to be looked at. But the answer came back. It was in an area of services constraints, which I don't believe to be true. It is on, I mean, I'm obviously going to talk about this later, but it is already on town sewage and water. There is a large area of, yeah, actually that's all right, either or. Next to the fuzz on the left, as we look at it, there's a large area of level 3 land. It's not that far away from the station compared to the other area.
Yes, we can see that on the left-hand side of the.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, I've jumped. Sorry.
Want to go back to the previous slide, or are you happy?
I am on slide 7, please, Ruth. Yeah, that's it. And this shows a problem for planners because, and again, I'm not a planner, but I am an engineer. I know a bit about pipework. The red indicates underground wastewater pipework, which is a good indication of where services have been installed already. You can see the new services that were put in for phase 1 of the development at Chamberlain Road, and there are no services for the fuzz or for the land next door. I view that as a solvable problem, and I view that as something that planners should deal with. That's a huge area there compared to the fuzz. It seems to be very readily available for development. There's even the Wairarapa industrial area has had pipes run next to it, or fairly close to it. But I'm not a planner, and I don't know how hard these problems are really to solve. It would obviously take some money from the Marston Council infrastructure budget. And slide 8, please. One last thing, I think that it will be okay to create that fuzz because it's fragmented, i.e. small pieces of land which have no value in terms of productive capacity. And so I thought I'd just throw this slide up and say, you know, there's some pretty big chunks of land there, one of which is 10 hectares, one of which is 5.5. I know that property well because I tried to buy it once. It is fantastic land, surrounded by a shelter belt of trees. It is perfect land for use. So if this goes ahead, I'm sure you're aware of the significance of creating a precedent. That if you can build on 10 hectares of LUC2 land there, then you can pretty much build on any lifestyle block around Marston. That's me finished.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I'm going to throw over to questions from the panel in a moment, but before I do, just a couple of generic questions from me. In relation to the land use classifications 1, 2, and 3 that you're on the various sources, what's your understanding as to when they were first arrived and applied?
Relatively recently. Well, the maps have been around.
Yes.
They were 80s, maybe?
Yes, the 80s. But
yeah. I've had a chat. Happens to be, I know my mate is the soil scientist, so he created the Ottenborough.
Are you aware of the mapping exercise having been updated since the 80s? No,
the date on those maps, I think, was 2023, but I don't know what the update was. I used the latest I could find.
But my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that there has been no additional field work to update those.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. As far as I can see, that has presented a problem for the councils, and they've put on the current, but they can change it if they want.
Yes,
as for the purposes of the plan.
Yes, the jurisdiction for that rests with the regional council, and the MPSHPL requires the regional council to make a change to the regional policy statement to update the LUC mapping.
Yep.
With more recent data, if you like. Yep. Until that happens, there are interim provisions in the MPS that provide guidance for councils on how to deal with these matters, both at the resource consent stage and at the plan making stage.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess that's a long way of asking whether the LUC classifications that are shown currently but are derived from information 40 years ago are still fit for purpose.
Well, it's a very good question, but I suppose you have to go with something, and you put it, and it is, as far as I can see, a stab of it has been put into the plan, and it's not going to change.
No.
Unless I'm mistaken.
Okay, no, okay, that's fine. Secondly, like you, we've read announcements from the coalition government on their intentions to alter various national planning standards and planning policy statements such as HPL. Until they do, we must give effect to the MPS HPL as it stands currently.
Yes.
Which is LUC 1, 2 and 3.
Yep.
Where it intersects with a general rural zone or a rural productive zone that's deemed to be HPL land.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, if there are changes to the policy statement, before we make as final decisions, we'll need to enact a process to deal with that. Yes. Okay. Okay, that was just the generic stuff from me. I'll just throw over to my colleagues. Any particular questions?
Yeah, I'm slightly confused with what you're telling me. So just bear with me. You're in favour of future zoning on the eastern side of Chamberlain Road. Is that what you're telling us?
Not on Chamberlain Road at all, actually.
I'm just, so this one, is that what you're saying is a good idea or a bad idea?
Bad.
Okay. So you don't want, so what you're saying is sort of no development in this Chamberlain Road area.
This LUC2 band. I don't know if one of the previous slides, I think this is the one where the colour, one, next one. So can I get up and point it out?
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. Just want to understand exactly where you're saying it's a good idea and where it's a bad.
This is LUC2.
Yep.
And it neatly goes right over the fuzz. And this is also LUC2. I've indicated here there's a possibility of it, which was Paul Bergen.
So you're okay with that if that was to be done?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument for saying you could get rid of this because it's within the council's pad. You just make that all LUC2 and not have this stripped through the middle. You could amalgamate it all. But at the moment, as it stands, that's a lower level of land than the fuzz.
So you wouldn't object to Mr. Bergen's request that his land gets zoned?
No, I've actually said do it.
Okay, good. I'm just trying to get it in my mind exactly what you're trying to tell me.
Just before you go.
Fine, I know.
Stay there, we haven't finished. Okay, so Mr. Bergen's land, you okay? Cool.
Yes.
Okay. Fuzz 2 in the yellow.
Yep. The red.
Okay, so that's the eastern side of Chamberlain Road. You're saying no?
Correct. This was the first phase of the development here.
Yep.
And originally in the draft plan, it said all of this would be part of.
Okay.
Well,
Right, so, but now we're not at that stage. We've narrowed it down a little bit. Okay. Then you're saying part 3 down towards the floodplain. That's where you're saying that would be okay with you.
oh yeah, it's not up to me to.
I know, but I just what your presentation is.
I'm trying to say yes. That seems to be a good alternative to the fuzz. So does this. So does that. So does that. I'm trying to make the point. There was no, as far as I can see, no compelling reason to choose that there. But the planner would have to really look into that. Interesting here, I know there are several notable developers who live in this area.
I'm just trying to get in my mind that we're on the western side of Masterton, where you're comfortable, where you're not comfortable, because we've had a presentation, somebody who wants to have their zone done. So Mr. Bergen, obviously.
Yeah.
So I just want to see if we've got points of contention between the two of you, but it seems we haven't. So
no, I haven't spoken to him. I actually thought that we should get together and get an expert witness and share the cost. That was all I was going to speak to him about when it comes to the rezone hearing? Because I know the weight that you guys put on that. I think I do.
That's completely up to you.
I'm trying to get a steer from the planners on that, and I'll work on that between now and then.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Just while you're up there, Mr. Byrne, you'd acknowledge that as the MPS HPL stands at the moment, the National Policy Statement would err against LUC3 being rezoned.
Yes, against all expansion. So how would you get your 7,200 houses?
The number 4 up there, what does that refer to?
That's level 4
LUC4 land.
LUC4, right? Yes, but I suspect it's right near the river. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Floodplain area, is it?
It could be. That's the Mudhonga golf course.
Yep.
And the farm. Sorry, yeah, that area. So that's the farm, I think. That's the golf course.
Often underwater.
I'm sorry, this is just the way it turns out. If you import,
That's fine.
Yeah.
if you import one over the other, it blanks out the roads and things like that were there.
That's useful context. It's important that we understand what you're telling us. Okay, grab a seat.
Thank you.
And I've been retired for 8 years. PowerPoint for 8 years. And it's all a little bit different nowadays.
You've done a great job.
I'll just check that. Anything further?
It's really useful.
Rihanna? Okay, so let's just recap. What's the decision that you would like this panel to make?
Taking into account my first submission is to redo the planning greenfield houses, the Marston district, and not go ahead with the buzz there, because I think you've got to look at the whole picture again.
When you say redo the planning, that's demand, supply, capacity, figures.
Yes.
Informed by the spatial plan.
Yes, I believe the FTS to be wrong, but I don't know if you had feedback on that this morning, but I believe it is considerably wrong, enough wrong to redo them.
Yeah, you're referring to the FD.
Yeah, the future
Development strategy.
I believe the figures in there are wrong, very wrong. And that means that it's created a belief that there hasn't got to be much greenfield development in Marston over the next 30 years.
You repeat that again, that it's created a belief that.
Well, I believe the thread through the proposed district plan and some of the section 42 reports is that there isn't a problem with development capacity in Marston. I believe there is. And until the FDS is fixed, whatever needs to be fixed with it, I don't know what you can do. I mean, that's the publicly available document. I'm sure the council's got other documents what the development capacity is, but that's the publicly available one, and that's the one that should be right. I can't see a reason why it should be wrong.
Yes, you gave us reasons for that in your presentation last time. The officers all consider that and may report back either on that previous work stream or this work stream in relation to that.
Can I just ask another question? So just for what you've just said there, when you're looking at that map and we're surrounded by LUC 1, 2 and 3, where would you see that, from your perspective, where would you allow sort of greenfields approaches to go? Obviously, if we're completely surrounded by these categories of land, they have to go somewhere.
Yes, I mean, I really am not a planner.
I've
done this purely as a desktop exercise.
Absolutely.
Somebody's got a couple of IT skills, but it seems to be that the area, they weren't far wrong with where the fuzz is there. But it's just unfortunate that probably before, back in the day, I mean, I don't know when that development started, it was 2018 or something like that. In the period since it started, along comes the MPS HPL and rather buggers up the this fuzz now. I think it's been assumed that would just go ahead, and it's the easiest thing is to just carry on with it, isn't it? But it is now a level 2 classified piece of land. But I think it probably is in the right place. unfortunately, if you look at the FDS, they draw a corridor where housing, from memory, they show a strip where the housing should probably go, and they have excluded that area left of the fuzz. They've only included the fuzz in it, which is odd, but not the land to the left of it. So that would also need correcting in the FDS to include more in the railway corridor piece.
And you would agree that development close to the rail corridor would be the preferable area to allow for transport links and so on, or?
Only because they say so, to be honest, because I really don't believe many people who live there are going to be on the train going anywhere personally, but that's looking, again, I'm not a planner. A lot of people will look to that and decided that railway corridors is the way to go.
Okay, so if that was the case, then on that side of Marston, it's a logical place to expand. Then would you agree with that?
Yes, to me it jumps out, but I did this in an afternoon.
Look, I know you're not a planner. I'm just, you've come to present, so I'm trying to tease out your thought process about how you got to this stage a little bit.
Well, the land around the aerodrome looks good, but it is an aerodrome, and there's a drag strip there as well, and I wouldn't live there due to the noise. But I don't know how much consideration one should give to that. But it's near Homebush, so relatively easy to put new infrastructure in if need be. I wouldn't go anywhere on the south because of the flooding, south and north, on the right hand side there, and there's just pockets anywhere else.
So then linking this to transport hubs, undesirable areas, I suppose, near sewerage and airports and things, then logically the future development zone on the western side of Masterton would you agree, would tend to be the logical place where this would go?
Yeah, to me it would. See, the developer has started buying up in the fuzz. I don't think they got all the land. The piece I looked at, I don't think they own that, but not sure. And I know to the left of that, where I've got the 3 there, that's a much bigger area. That's relatively small lifestyle blocks, which will present a challenge. But as I said, it's a solvable issue. That land was probably always intended for residential use at some point. It's a bit of a debate as to whether or not it's special rural was for future development or to prevent houses being built on hazardous areas. I mean, there's nothing hazardous about that area that I can see. But I think it was actually reserved, if you like, for residential housing in the future, was really its purpose. But yeah, the people who live there would be quite surprised, I think, to have fuzz put across the top of it, all their properties along there. But then, as I say, several notable developers are bought in there, and I think they know what's likely to happen.
Terrific. Thank you.
Mr. Byrne, just so carrying on with recap, you're encouraging the panel to relook at the numbers and the Masterton or Greenfield development and its contribution to projected demand.
I don't think I can actually do that, but yes, I am.
Yeah. Yes, and certainly we have no jurisdiction over the FDS.
Yep.
The only guidance from the FDS is that we must have regard to it. You're wanting the fuzz that's notified in the proposed district plan deleted, and you're not opposed to the request by Mr. Bergen to have fuzz over his land.
Absolutely not. I've not. I mean, I haven't used the process to object to anybody's.
No. Just getting it for the record.
Yeah.
By way of explanation, the notification of the MPS HPL when it occurred, I think, sometime during 2022, came at a time when the district plan was well advanced in terms of being drafted. Certainly the draft wasn't out at that stage, but it caused a rethink by council officers as to the whole approach to rural subdivision, lifestyle development, future urban zoning. At that stage, it wasn't clear whether the MPS HPL was going to cover LUC3 land. Earlier drafts had indicated that it might or might not. turned out that it did. So that because of its force and directive force, it created a need to revisit the zoning strategy. And if there's a future change to that before we make decisions, then again, we'll have to go through the same process. That's probably all I need to say at this stage. We'll hear from you in one more time, I imagine, in relation to the rezonings, which, Hamish, when are they scheduled for? Yeah, May next year. It's one of the last hearings.
Mhm.
And hopefully we might have some further direction from the government by then.
Yes, that would help.
What will happen now is, I think I explained last time that the officers will respond to the matters that they've heard during the hearing, and they'll produce what's known as a right of reply report in 10 to 15 working days' time, and that'll be posted on the web, and we'll consider that as part of our deliberations, but we won't be issuing any decisions until we're issuing all our decisions collectively, and they'll be issued at the end of the process so that they interrelate with one another.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes, sure.
So, because I've not been through this process before, I thought the rezoning was at the end so that you could make any decisions that may affect the rezoning decisions ahead of.
No, we'll consider all of those matters collectively.
Right, so you're not going to do an interim release of decisions like on the fuzz, for example?
Not at all.
No, okay.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
see you in May.
Got a horrible feeling I went over 15 minutes.
That's quite all right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
you, Mr. Byrne.
Thanks.
Okay, the next submitter is submitter 264, Nari Manea. Welcome.
Thank you very
Come
much.
on up to the table. Your colleague like to join you also?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Nari, my name's David McMahon. I'm the chair of the panel. I don't believe we've met before. And I'm joined by
Hi, Robin Cherry Campbell.
Kia ora matua.
Kia ora.
Alistair Plummer.
Great boy.
These ones here.
Yes, indeed. These are the reporting officers. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Becca Adams. I'm a planning officer at Carterton District Council.
Hi, I'm Alice Balloon. I'm reporting officer for the Centre Zone chapter, Marsden District Council.
I think I've met before.
Hi, my name is Erica Wheatley. I'm a planner with Wahama School. I'm working for the councils on the review, and I'm the reporting officer for the residential zone.
Kia ora, I'm Solitaire Robertson, Planning Manager here at Carterton District Council.
And we've got Mr. Wesney in the back and our fellow commissioner. Like to introduce yourself?
Oh, Brian Miller.
Yes.
Hey, Brian. I didn't recognise it before.
Do you have any written material and any additional written material that you want us to have in front of us when you present?
Well, I just scribbled some notes down on my submission.
That's fine.
Yeah. But have you got copies of this?
You've got copies of the original submission
Yeah.
in front of me on my laptop.
Yeah. I've just scribbled all over
Will
my.
you,
Yep.
you proceed and begin.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know whether it's issue at hand is property that I was concerned about with regards to infill housing was the property behind me, but that has since been sold.
Okay.
And but the new owner now has the resource consent, and so there's still the issue lies. It's about non-notifiable consent. I wasn't aware that the house behind me had a consent to build a home behind them. And then I had to look at what that impact would have on me as a homeowner. And I spoke to my neighbours, but they weren't going to be directly affected by another home behind me. And that it would only affect me. So that was the concern that I had with regards to finding out that way from the new owner that she had a resource consent to build a new home. And she gave me a brief outline of what was going to happen, and effectively telling me that there's nothing you can do about it. And that really pissed me off, if you like. And I thought, well, where the hell have you come from? Auckland. And I said, you've only been here 2 minutes and you're throwing your weight around on me? Who the hell do you think you are? It make you felt like that. And anyway, so that's what my my submission is about. It's about finding out that there was a non-notifiable consent to build a home behind the existing home that she brought. And so,
Was that on Colombo Road?
no, it was in Iron Street,
Line Street?
Iron Street.
Line Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she has since sold the house now, and the new property owner, I have the consent. And so that situation, as far as I'm concerned, is still active, is still alive. And and I've spoken to them, and they're very nice people, but it just allows them the opportune chance, if they wish to put something in the back there, then they can. And I just want to briefly describe to you the east side area. It's always been regarded as the poor area of town. And the west side area, which this gentleman was talking about, has always been considered as the best part of town. And so therefore, what concerns me is that when I spoke to the town planner about infill housing on the east side, I asked her why a number of properties were being brought up by speculators. And she says, because it's cheap. And they can come in there, speculators can come in there, buy a half-acre section and either remove the existing home on there and put in infill homes, or they can build behind the existing home. And so that worried me with regards to the poor side of town. And it has to be noted, it is noted as the poor side of town. And if you have a look at the deprivation statistics that were done by Auckland University, as 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, the east side scores 10 each and every time. In home ownership, it scores 10. In employment, it scores 10. In crime, it scores 10. In health statistics, it scores 10. And a lot of that information has come from MSD, from the police, and from the District Health Board. And so therefore, the east side of town is a really deprived area. If you look at those statistics, and if you have a look at the 2018 electoral statistics, it also describes the east side of town as a 10. And if you have a look at other studies that are done by the information is just there. And so my concern is that the poor side of town, once again, is being picked on, and people that there are some good people on the east side, I'll tell you that. But there are those that will say, well, I live on the south end of the east side, which is the better side. But the thing is that State Highway number 2 puts you on the east side. And that's it. There's no particular good zone or particular nice zone. If you're on the east side, you're on the east side. And that's how you are described. Oh, they live on the east side. And if you have a look at some of the real estate information that goes out, and I've read it online, and that information says avoid buying property on the east side. Crime rate over there is this, unemployment is this, and the education system over there is not very good. And I've lived there 40 years. I've grown up all my life on the east side. And I'm just getting brassed up with the fact that that speculators are now coming in and buying up prime property very cheap and putting homes in there, making their money and pissing off. Yet those of us that are still there, we have to put up with it. Now with, what's his name, Winston Peters now with his granny flat idea going in there, well, it's only just going to open it up a bit more. And fast tracking everything like that. You just have no say in the matter anymore.
Any questions submitted from the panel?
What is it that you're actually asking for here to do in the district plan?
I'm not against infill housing just as long as it's done properly. And but I know that there's going to be a hell of a lot of pressure there on the infrastructure because the east side is prone to flooding. And one of the other floods we had come through the east side there, people were issued with portaloos because the wastewater couldn't get away. And they are still trying to remedy that. But the thing is that you keep building homes on the east side, it's going to put more pressure on that infrastructure than what we are having to put up with now. And so what I'm saying is that, yeah, infill housing is okay, but don't push the community out. And secondly, you know, clean up the infrastructure just so that we are not having to put up with the floods and the drains that are being blocked up all the time. East side is on the downhill of town. So everything from this guy was talking about the west side ends up on our side of the town.
So reading your submission, would it be fair to say that one of the things you would like to see in the plan is infill housing subject to affected parties being notified?
Oh, well, consultation, yeah.
Sort of thing that I'm trying to sort of work out what it is that in a plan that we could say, okay, how can we give effect to your concerns, which are absolutely valid concerns, and I've known them since I was growing up as well, so they're not new, but how do we make it so that people that live in your area of the town are not affected in the way that you feel you're affected at the moment? So to do that is having something in the plan that could mean that if you're boundaring an infill area that you're notified as an affected party. Is that sort of the thing that you're looking at?
That's right.
Okay.
Because when I spoke to the town planner about it, and she said, well, actually the application ticked all the boxes, and so therefore the consent was issued.
So logically then what you're suggesting is that the plan is forgetting the human cost of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's useful to hear that.
Thank you.
There are certain things that the district plan can deliver and there's certain things that they can't. That's one of the matters that the plan can actually prescribe an approach to notification of resource consent applications rather than leaving it to being decided on a merit basis for each and every application. But so you're suggesting that the plan might want to take a proactive role in doing that?
Well, it would be good too if the councils they do know and understand that the east side, you know, the deprivation score is 10. How can they improve it?
Sure. The other thing you talked about was you're not opposed to infill development so long as it's done properly. Council have developed a residential design guide that sits inside the district plan that where there are certain exceedances or where there's a certain number of units proposed, a development needs to be considered at a resource consent stage against that residential design guide. Was that something that you would support?
I've seen some of that, and it is quite nice.
Okay.
But not all of it.
Okay.
There have been some infill homes where a 3-bedroom home has just been squashed onto the section. Boundaries very close to the boundary line, and in terms of emergency services, the fire brigade can't get up the driveway.
Sure. We heard from a submitter this morning that encouraged the panel to move away from minimum site allotment sizes and let the market decide. He wasn't suggesting we get away with minimum heights or setbacks or site coverage, but wanted the minimum allotment sizes to be dispensed with.
It's been what?
Dispense with that there'd be no minimum standards for allotment sizes in residential zone. What would your response be to that?
Well, if you read some of the data that I've read, and with regards to emergency services, some of those new developments, they can't get down the street. Some of those new developments, there's no fire hydrants. Some of those new developments, where there is water, it's very restrictive. There's no pressure in the pipelines or anything like that. And some of those developments are so close to other neighbouring properties that if this house is on fire, there's every likelihood others will catch fire.
Sure. So I take it from that answer, you would be opposed to a suggestion to get rid of minimum allotment sizes.
Oh, of course.
It's all from me. Anything from my colleagues to my right?
Carl, kia ora.
He lives on the east side.
No, thank you. And yeah, I reading through your submission on the fact that on the east side it is downhill effectively, and with all the flooding and the infrastructure, it is something that does maybe can't be addressed in the plan, but it is definitely something.
Yes, but if you allow more housing to go into that area, it's going to put more pressure on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Judy, am I 15 minutes up,
It
eh?
is indeed. Your timing's impeccable.
Right, no.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey. Okay, the next submitter is the Enviro NZ, represented by Karen Rosser. Good afternoon, Ms. Rosser. Can you hear us?
Yes, here we are.
Good afternoon. You're coming through loud and clear. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you very much.
You've got a colleague with you?
I do.
I'm not Karen Rosser. I'm Wayne Plummer.
Wayne, welcome, Wayne.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's the infrastructure services manager. So you'll be hearing from him very soon. I just wanted to introduce myself as well. I'm an environmental planner with Enviro NZ Services Limited. This means I'm an in-house planner for all sort of RMA matters. Enviro NZ is a nationally significant provider of waste management infrastructure. It has private collection services in the Wairarapa district, and it operates the Bonnie Glen landfill jointly with Waste Management. And it also has many other resource recovery facilities and refuse transfer stations in the Lower North Island. So that's where we are in your area. And there's also a main site in the Wairarapa, is a depot in Norman Avenue in the Waingawa industrial area. So I submitted previously on your strategic, I gave you evidence on the strategic hearing. However, I was not well on that hearing, and I'm not feeling great today either, but I've pulled my socks up and come along. That evidence just basically, I guess, outlined the importance of waste infrastructure in sort of, particularly if you're looking at intensification. So we have waste outlined in major strategies of government, the infrastructure strategy and the waste strategy. And sort of the main goals of those strategies are to provide for a circular economy. And this allows for waste to be diverted. The aim from that is that waste can be diverted from landfills, and that our greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, as obviously landfill gas is quite a major climate change contributor. District plans have a large part to play in ensuring waste infrastructure can diversify to achieve this, because if you need to go forward to a circular economy, we've got to have a lot more sorting and space for the different waste streams. And so to achieve that, we need to make sure that new development allows for the separation and collection of those different waste streams. So the policies, objectives and rules that govern urban zones and the general industrial zone, which is obviously the topic of this hearing, need to ensure that waste infrastructure is provided for, and so that we can also deliver on the emissions reduction plan, which has some targets which are also followed through into the wider Wellington waste management minimisation plan. So one of the things we submitted upon was that there should be a standard in the medium density residential precinct to define the minimum storage area for waste management bins and the minimum curb width of space for bins. And that was for sites on less than 200 square metres. Now, there's a lot of evidence out there to show that if you don't manage this, you end up with a number of impacts. One of them is that too many bins block the footpath to allow safe pedestrian access, and I see that on my walk to work every Tuesday, just around the corner here. Too many bins along the frontage that doesn't allow for the safe collection of waste by the collection vehicle. We have an inadequate bin storage on site in terms of the physical space provided. So if that's not thought about right at the outset in the design of your dwellings, you end up having bins located in common areas or within outdoor living spaces. And the on-site location of waste storage, if that's if it's not thought about, it also sometimes will end up, you might need to pull your bins through a house to get to the curb, or down lots of steps or steep gradients, and obviously those cause lots of accidents, and obviously you get lots of complaints from residents. And you can obviously get accidents where pedestrians and cyclists are squeezed into the road corridor, and you can get obviously hygiene and amenity complaints when the storage is inadequate or takes up common areas. So obviously the other impact of this is that you can't achieve your waste reduction targets because you can't because we get basically, and Wayne can attest to this, that we get a lot of contamination in our waste streams that are being picked up because people haven't been able to adequately sort them on site.
Ms. Rosser,
So,
Ms. Rosser, can I just ask you
yes.
a report here? We understand all that. We've read
Yep.
your evidence. What I should have said at the start was, have you had an opportunity to look at the summary statements that have been produced by the officers?
No, I looked online yesterday and I could not see them yet, so they weren't posted at that point.
Okay, well, that understood. We've been making every endeavour to make sure that they're online earlier, but we had a long day yesterday in which we heard from the officers in relation to the matter that you've just been talking about, and particularly standard 13 in the general residential zone. The officers are recommending a standard along the lines that you've requested in your submission.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's pretty much derived from your submission, I think, and I'm looking at Ms. Wheatley.
Largely, yes, with a couple of tweaks and edits to make it consistent with the plan and to make it more enforceable.
Yes, but the basic format follows that along the lines that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's about just having some minimum thresholds, because if you don't have that space allocated, you've got nothing to judge, your application by.
Yes. So you have the support of the officer on that.
Okay, fantastic.
So I don't think you need to speak to that in any great length today. I would encourage you to have a look at the wording of that. That's it. And I'm assured that those summary statements are on the webpage now. So the process for doing that is I suggest that you have a look at that, and if you've got any concerns with the wording, get in contact with Ms. Wheatley and see if you can't resolve an alternative wording. if you're still at odds at the end of that, then I'm happy for you and to, in an economical sense, just explain how you'd like to see the wording altered. And if you can get that to Ms. Wheatley, she'll report back on that as part of her right of reply that's due in 10 to 15
Okay.
working. So that's the waste
Fantastic.
storage. That's the waste storage and collection areas for the residential zones. There were some other matters that you were.
Yes, I wonder what the main issue I think left is which was left after the Section 42A report came out, was the policy 5 for the general industrial zone and the subsequent rule for residential activities in the general industrial zone. So the submission requested that instead of restrict, you should have avoid activities that could be sensitive to industrial activities being located to the industrial zone. And the other one was the general industrial zone rule, which was it's permitted to have residential in that zone under certain circumstances, and I requested that it should be discretionary, and when it didn't comply, non-compliant.
Yes, again, we had a large discussion about that yesterday. Both of those matters are covered in the summary statement prepared by Ms. Robertson. I think there might have been some movement on the avoidance issue on policy 5, looking at it, Robertson.
No, we added sensitive, but we still retained.
Word avoid.
No, we didn't put avoid in there.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing it up. I'll just.
Just bear with me a minute, Ms. Rosso. I'll just get a copy of that.
Yeah.
Everyone but that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't recommend any changes to my section 42 in relation to policy P5.
And on the rule regarding discretionary.
No, on the rule regarding the discretionary, we believed that, well, I was of the opinion still in my 42 report that there's 3 criteria that need to be met.
Yes, that's right.
And that they're quite stringent criteria. And from experience over the last 10 years, we've had one residential activity pop up in the Wairarapa industrial zone.
So maybe if with your permission, I can just give a little bit more of a practical background. That's why Karen's asked me to speak in respect of caretaker properties in industrial zones. So you will have read the statement here about our development across from our industrial waste treatment facility, whereby 28 years ago this was zoned as heavy industrial. It changed to allow caretaker residents. In those 28 years, we now have pretty much a fully fledged residential development in the 24 units with children, with families, up to 6 members. We have children running around, cycles running around in this heavy industrial zone, and there is no enforcement of that zone,
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Could you could you advise of the location? Because it doesn't sound like the Wairarapa, just for clarification.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's in Christchurch.
It's in Christchurch, and it's just
It's an example.
Making it an example and making it similar to what you are planning to do with caretaker residents.
Because they had a very similar rule in Christchurch, and over time, the rule has been abused, I would say.
Yeah, it's the unintended consequences, I suppose, of saying allowing a caretaker facility or caretaker residence in these industrial premise. And basically, there doesn't seem to be any enforcement of the rule and the caretaker definition. And now we've got a fully residential community alongside this heavy industrial 8 zoned area. So That's happened over time, and there's been creep, from one person to a hairdressing salon, etc., etc. So if you're going to have the enforcement to follow that up and monitor that, then that would be great. But
Mr. Plummer, we're entitled to rely on rules being enforced. We have to treat rules at face value. So,
well, I guess in that sense, I would like to, add a comment that the rule itself is a little bit, I think, loose to enforce. I mean, because you've got to define what ancillary is. I mean, obviously, ancillary is subsidiary, but ancillary in relation to, I guess, an industrial business that's possibly on the ground floor and residential on the top floor, for example. I'm just saying, what if they want to add a bedroom downstairs? So it's, there's no, I guess, gross floor area, for example, to determine where that threshold should lie. I just think defining ancillary from that point, from an enforcement point of view, would be difficult. And also sometimes how to prove when a worker's, I guess, they work in the premises. I think Wayne has found examples where that's been difficult to prove in terms of, and the type of industrial business as well can be problematic to define whether it meets the definition. So my personal opinion is that the rule itself isn't robust enough as it stands, and that why if you did make it discretionary, you could put obviously assess each case on its merits and also provide enduring conditions to ensure that it was monitored in a different way.
Okay. Do you acknowledge that those three permitted criteria are conjunctive, that all three must be met?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So in relation to the Rule 6, your request is instead of R6(1) being permitted, your request that is discretionary?
Correct, yes.
Discretionary or restricted?
Or restricted, yeah.
Well, I guess discretionary in this particular instance, because then you didn't have to, actually discretionary, because I think in those for the industrial zones in your district, they are quite limited. You don't have a lot of them. And therefore, I think by making it discretionary, you can obviously look at that in a holistic way. So that can come into your decision making.
What's the risk of these situations that you and Mr. Plummer have outlined occurring in those limited industrial zones in terms of EnviroNZ's facilities?
You could get like sort of owner-occupier industrial units being set up where they have an industrial business on the ground floor and residential on the top, and the issue is about perception in terms of reverse sensitivity. So it would be, they start, complaints start to happen in relation to noise, odour, traffic movements.
What I actually meant was, what's the actual risk as it stands currently today?
I believe there does seem to be some empty land around that site. So potentially, there could be a development at some point in the future, not far from there. There's quite a lot down the end of Norman Road.
But when you say development, are you saying there could be residential development, or are you saying more industrial development?
No, I'm talking about more the owner-occupier type of development model for industrial units, where you have small industrial units with people living above them. It's happened a lot in Auckland. And it hasn't led to, I guess, good separation of the industrial activities.
Okay.
You end up getting a creep model of sort of general business happening instead of the industrial activities, which you that's basically the only zone you've got for that activity.
Yes. Ms. Prosser, the options based on your relief would be to run with the discretionary activity status for residential activities in the industrial zone, or to improve the workability and robustness of the permitted activity rules. Which of those two options do you prefer?
Prefer the discretionary activity option.
Yeah.
If you had to go the other way, I think you'd need at least like a maximum floor area threshold, for example, because at least that will give you some ability to, I guess, just determine what is an ancillary threshold.
Yes, okay. And would a definition of ancillary assist in any way? Or would
I think the planning standards does have a definition, but I still think it's not easy to enforce in these types of situations.
Okay, so that's where a specific square meterage threshold would assist.
I do believe it would assist, but I still believe that having it discretionary would at least allow all the impacts to be assessed.
Is it possible to identify matters of discretion if the panel was of a mind to look at a middle ground between permitted and fully discretionary as restricted discretionary?
Yes, I'm sure we could assist with that.
Presumably the concerns are ring fenceable as matters of discretion. They wouldn't necessarily need to have the full power of unlimited discretion.
Yes, I guess that's true if you can define them well enough, yes.
Yes, I mean, in this case, it's about the reverse sensitivity effects on established industrial activities, presumably, in terms of their ability to continue.
And future ones. Don't forget, you see, because particularly some of the heavier and slightly heavier industrial activities, they have to get regional consents. So the regional consents require often a separation distance to sensitive activities. So once you have a sensitive activity establishing in your industrial area, that reduces that separation distance immediately to make it difficult to site your necessary industry in that location. So that's the flip side of so I guess that's another way of looking at it as well. You can't have future industrial establishing there if they need a regional consent. Okay,
understood. Let's see if there's any other questions from the panel in relation to those matters.
Oh,
no. So that's the residential issue in industrial zones. Were there any other matters that you wanted to draw to our attention?
I think just the definition of organic composting, I think it just needed, I really think it should be heard in the rural hearing.
Organic composting.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that was put in the submission was the government requirement to provide for organic food waste collection and by 2030 in urban areas, over 1,000 people, I think. And therefore, most district plans don't have the most obvious way of dealing with this is composting.
Yes.
it's variously defined, whether it's a waste activity or a rural industry activity or a industrial activity. So having a definition to then make it a subset of another definition so that at least it has a consenting pathway, I guess will allow the activity to be, I guess, represented in the future.
And you're suggesting that that should be the subject of a future hearing, presumably the rural.
So general rules.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the rural zone is usually where these activities in 99% of the cases that's where you're going to end up locating it.
That's our next hearing stream, coincidentally. So that kicks up on the 14th of October. So I'll talk to Mr. Wesney about that, who's coordinating those hearings. I'll just check from the officers, any matters of clarification from these two witnesses? You can ask through me, and I'll decide whether we can develop a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering whether there was any thoughts on what may be an acceptable minimum floor size, given what we have for what we classify as minor dwellings in other areas of the plan.
Yeah, that question, Ms. Rosser?
Well, I'm not sure. What is your? I haven't obviously looked at that very carefully. What is your minimum floor size?
Or what would you classify if we were going to put another condition in that industrial zone relating to gross floor area for a residential component? Do you have any suggestions from your experience as to what might be suitable?
Well, I mean, 60 square metres, you can get a 2-bedroom unit there. So that would usually be sufficient, I would have thought.
Okay.
I'm not sure what your minor unit size is at the moment.
It's 60 in our operative plan, and we have increased it, proposing to increase it through the district plan to 80, primarily because there was quite a bit of difficulty in getting prefabricated units under 60 square metres. They seem to sit between 65 and 70 as, pre-built.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would hope that you wouldn't have that solution. That wouldn't be a solution in an industrial zone, if you see what I'm saying.
Yes, we understand that. It's just we're inviting you to give your opinion on if it was a solution that the panel wanted to explore further.
Yeah, I mean, because if it's a caretaker, I guess it's there as a management kind of scenario. So if you make it any bigger than that, it does invite a broader
60.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've had another opinion there. So 60 as well. I guess, yeah, if it's bigger, you could get more people living on site.
Okay. Way I'll handle that is that Ms. Robertson will be reporting back to the panel in the next 3 weeks in relation to her final recommendations. If she feels she needs to get in touch with you to seek any further clarification or share any draft rules with you, she'll do that.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. Just pause a moment, please.
So I asked a question about cubes.
Okay.
Yes. And yeah, it's not something a developer can do. It's council intent. So they've sort of reinforced it again. Need something.
Something that we residential zone. Yeah.
It's in the.
Yeah, so this is the way. Let's see.
That you see under the requirement of a developer. Yeah, the developer doesn't do this.
Oh.
Do you?
And it's like
Always.
Ms. Rosser, Commissioner Plummer has a question for you in relation to the waste storage and collection area rule that I indicated had received a favourable recommendation from the officer. And it concerns clause number 3, and I'll just let him put that question to you.
Yeah, it's about the curbside space of 1 metre per dwelling. And how is it, that's not a developer's responsibility because that's on a street and a curb of a street where a footpath may well be. So how is it that you can influence that when you're, if there's a development going on? How?
Well, I guess to me it's quite an easy calculation. So you've got a driveway, usually on-site access, which will take up so much of the curb space you've got existing. Then you've got so many units designed. So those units will need to have at least, each unit will need, so much of that remaining space. So if you require some space to get on-site access, pedestrian access, and some for vehicle access, then the remaining space and across the frontage, we're not. So that's where you measure it from.
I'm trying to picture this practically when the vehicles drive down the road and pick up the bins. That space is part of the road.
Legal road.
It's the part of the legal road width.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah. Well, I
it's not
guess
yours,
in
so
that
you
sense,
can't-
yeah. If you've got like power poles, etc., then you'll need to obviously take those out of the equation.
But it's not your land.
But
so
you
how
can generally, yes. No, well, I know that you'd have to account for those types of existing street features to make sure that you had enough space to put your bins out.
I think we might be just talking across purposes here. I'm just going to invite Ms. Wheatley to clarify the matter for us. It's her recommendation.
Yes, sorry. So just to clarify whether you're seeking it be curbside as in, where the footpath and the curb and the berm sort of is, or whether you see curbside as being within the subject site, like within the site that's being developed? Or do you?
Are we talking about private land or are we talking about road reserve?
We're talking about road reserve because that's where they get collected from.
Okay.
Sorry, that wasn't my understanding.
Yeah, so that's why I've got the confusion now, of course, because they can't affect that.
Nice.
Now that
Well, you can obviously, but when you're designing, you can look at what your features are in the road space, and obviously you need to ensure that you've got enough space there to put the number of bins out that each house needs. The more dwellings. If you've only got 7 metres of space, but you want to design for 10 dwellings, you don't have enough on-site curbs to put your bins out, and you have to stack them, and that's when we get the issues with collection. So yeah, so that's to me how the rule would work, and that would require an on-site collection of waste, not if you've got that many, too many units.
Okay. Where that's heading, I think, is Ms. Wheatley will be in contact with you to discuss the wording that I indicated was in the summary statement.
Yeah, okay.
The same process as I've indicated for you and Ms. Robertson in relation to the industrial zone.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Okay, if that concludes your presentation, thank you for your time and attendance today. And both Ms. Wheatley and Ms. Robertson will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey. Takes us to submitter 172, Fire and Emergency New Zealand. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Are you Mr. Allen or?
I am. Paul is joining us online today.
Well, welcome, Mr. Gibbsy.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair and panel members.
Before you start, just so that we're on the same page, the officers have prepared summary statements that were presented yesterday at the hearing. Gibbsy, have you had an opportunity to read those?
I have, yes. I read them late this morning.
Good. Thank you for that. That's useful I'm hoping that might help focus the presentation. You'll see that there's been some movement by the officers in relation to some matters on the subject of the activity status of emergency service facilities. The recommendation has not been to accept permitted activity, but to have a prescribed restricted discretionary activity status. In relation to the water supply standard in relation to firefighting, there's been a recommendation to include a new standard into the provisions on that. So they were the two of the key talking points at yesterday's hearing.
Yes, and perhaps unsurprisingly, I support both of those across the various zones and the various reporting officers. Yeah, I think, you know, the adoption of a precautionary approach to firefighting water supply is a good one and something I wholeheartedly support. The restricted discretionary activity status was something I suggested in my evidence. Perhaps the only comment I would make was maybe one or two of the proposed matters of discretion I might have comment on, and perhaps may benefit from further refinement, but very minimal.
Yes, that's very pleasing to hear that, Mr. Gimsky, because we, in terms of the matters of discretion, and you'll see that all 5 reporting officers dealt with the status of emergency services facilities in the various zones, residential through to open space, centres, industrial, etc. One of the difficulties they had was they felt that the matters of discretion that you had indicated were quite broad, and there was an attempt to try and specify them to make them match a RDA status as opposed to being so broad as to really be fully discretionary type matters. So that was their attempt. I'm open to you talking briefly about how they might have some further refinement might occur today, but also I'll give you that opportunity to discuss that with the officers directly between now and the close of the hearing next Friday week. So don't feel that you have to come up with all the answers today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and very happy to discuss further with officers between now and Friday. I suppose the key ones, and this is just my first glance at them a couple of hours ago, were the hours of operation one. I suppose noting that inherently emergency services are 24/7 operations. Loss of landscaping perhaps was just a little open-ended as to what that might mean. And the only other sort of observation I made was the final sort of catch-all. Potentially there's an element of duplication there with some of the earlier matters, but also possibly not. I probably need to consider that a bit further.
What matter are you referring to particularly there? Is that the reverse sensitivity or that?
No, that would be, apologies, I'll just bring it up. The non-compliance
with the standards.
With the standards. In practice, they're likely to be many of those earlier proposed matters of discretion.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. You appreciate that's quite a standard way of expressing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And on the hours of operation, it doesn't prescribe hours. It's just a matter to be considered. But certainly you can understand that to be an effective emergency service operation, a restriction on the hours of operation could be quite restrictive. Yes. But it may be about the use of alarms as opposed to the use of pages, that sort of thing, particularly for rural, for volunteer fire brigades, etc. So I've had some experience in that field, and we know there's been a move to more electronic methods of the call out as opposed to using the wind down and wind up alarm system. But look, more than happy for you to have that discussion offline with possibly Ms. Wheatley as the lead on that matter, because the other reporting officers have taken a lead from her report on that. So
yeah, very, very happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where does that leave us then? Are there any residual matters that I've glossed over or haven't covered? And
Not that I'm aware of. Those two matters were the focus of my evidence. I did invite Mr. Allen, Brendan Allen, along to come along with me today, possibly just to talk about some on-the-ground real-life situations, particularly around firefighting water supply, if that would still be of interest to the panel. But in terms of the planning matters and my evidence, yeah, very much resolved in my view.
yes, that's probably a good idea, Mr. Allen, because one of the things we've asked the officers to do is to just double check with the development engineers and the council so they're comfortable with that firefighting standard.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Just given the planning matters we just discussed regarding stations, just one thing that I'd like the officers to possibly take into account when they're considering where the stations may or may not be able to be used as an activity is that the majority of our stations in the Wairarapa are volunteer only. The only career station we have is Marston currently. We do need those stations to be in a central area where the volunteers live and work, so that they have the ability to respond to the station in a timely fashion and also respond from the station to any call in a timely fashion as well.
And from a planning perspective, Mr. Allen, you'll see that one of the matters of discretion is the functional and operational need to be located wherever the proposal is. So that's certainly centre consideration.
Yep. Yeah, it's just mainly to ensure that our perspective on that was put forward.
Okay.
So for the firefighting water supply side of things, are you happy for me to just continue?
Please do.
I've got some stuff some maps I'm just going to put up on the screen here if you guys are happy.
You have access to the screen, do you?
We're about to find out. Okay. So that I can actually see what I'm looking at. Right, so this is an aerial view of central Carterton. So you'll see that it's a little bit hard to see on the screen in here, but you'll see in the centre there's a 300 square metre approximately building. That building is now a car park. It's just down on the corner of Holloway Street down here. So we had a fire in that building a couple of years ago. We had not quite enough water to actually affect the extinguishment of that building at the time. What we resorted to was up at the top end of the map there, you'll see Memorial Square. Yes. On the state highway side of Memorial Square, there's actually, a lot of people won't be aware of it, but there's actually a well there. So because of our knowledge in town here that was there, we actually inserted a pump into that, and that was what essentially gave us the water supply to knock the fire over and then get to a point where we could then just use the town's main for the final extinguishment. Sure. But we were getting to a point where we were actually struggling, given the amount of water we were flowing, to actually control that fire, and that's only on a 300 square metre building. Sure. So I'm not sure how many of the members are aware of the Firefighting Water Supplies Code of Practice and how we work out how much water we need to fight a fire. But essentially, we start off with the usage of the building, so a fire hazard category, and then we look at the size of the building in terms of a floor area within that category, and that determines a fire water number, which is, for this building, is fire water 3, as I've roughly determined it this morning. So that's roughly what we assume that most water supplies within the Wairarapa are built upon, is a fire water 3 level. However, if we then move on from Carterton Central and we shoot up to Wainawa, so this is the Wainawa Industrial Estate, which I'll also note is obviously to the south and west there is in the proposed plan for development or further development. We have water supplies in there, but we have a building I've just got in the middle here. I'll have to zoom in on that a bit, unfortunately, for your screen. So this is not to be taken as us picking on anybody in particular, but we do have main freight in the centre there, which is basically a representative building type for that area. That is approximately 1,750 square metres, and under the Firefighting Water Supplies Code of Practice, that would be fire water 6. or Firewater 7, dependent on what the storage level of things are within the building. And obviously at Firewater 3, we're very deficient in that area for firefighting water supplies. You'll note right at the top in the centre of that image, there's actually a bit of a lake there. That does belong to Carterton District Council, I'm led to believe, and as part of a previous water supply. It's not currently really in use, but we do have access to a singular hydrant at the base of that within the industrial yard of Kiwi Lumber there. But obviously that gives us a very large hose run distance to then overcome.
On the principle of no stupid questions, when you say Firewater 7, are you talking quantity of water or pressure of water?
So quantity of water. Okay, so the Firewater is derived on, what I'll do is I'll quickly bring up the code of practice and just scroll through. You'll have to excuse me, this closed and I haven't gotten back to the correct page yet.
20.
So, oh, there we go. Thank you very much. So 23. So
We did.
when we're looking at, so this is the fire hazard categories of the building. So they're down in the notes there in the very small text for those that need glasses. But you'll see Firewater 7 is more to the right-hand side and the lower side of the table. So basically Firewater 7 is the highest risk you have. Firewater 7 is an engineered solution to things. So basically they will work out, an engineer will sit there and work out with calculations provided within the document, the water supply that would be required for that building were it to catch fire and we were required to put it out. Just to give a rough idea, looking at Firewater 6, that is 12,000 litres a minute for 180 minutes. So that's 2.1 million litres of water. So it looks like a huge amount, but if we go back to Firewater 2, which is the minimum standard for a residential area for us, so a residential house without sprinklers is Firewater 2, and a commercial building with sprinklers is also Firewater 2, and that is 1,500 litres a minute for 30 minutes, because essentially we should be able to get on top of a fire of that size or with a sprinkler system involved within that 30-minute period, and that's 45,000 litres of water. So that's what we'd be looking at in like the general rural zones and things like that. Remembering that our pumping appliances, if we max it out, we're looking at 2,000 litres a minute. We're going to empty that 45,000 litre storage in under 20 minutes, or just on 20 minutes.
So all our towns, did you say, are at Firewater 3?
At an absolute maximum. Greyhound struggles to attain Firewater 2 at the best of times. So if we, while we're talking about Greyhound and deficiencies.
Let's not talk about Greyhound.
Unfortunately. So this is the south end of Greyhound. Few of us who have been around the Wairarapa for a while will recognise the confines of Kuranui College, just on the right-hand side of the centre there. So Kuranui currently have a proposed new gymnasium that is going to be sprinklered. That is going to be Firewater 2. However, they do have some new builds on site. I'm only considering new builds here, not the existing buildings. The new builds on site would be Firewater 3, some of them that are unsprinkled. So we're struggling at that point in the water supply in Greytown to meet Firewater 3 because it's so far from the supply point. And one of the pumps, as far as I'm aware, is only rated to between 1,500 and 2,000 litres a minute for the entire supply, let alone us drawing the maximum of it without everybody else going about their normal day-to-day business in the middle of the day.
Because now I completely understand what Wellington Water's been trying to tell us about the water situation.
And then if we look to the left-hand side here of the centre, you'll see we have a 1,975 approximately square metre building, which is the new medical centre. That would be Firewater 7. So if we're struggling to get to Firewater 3, Firewater 7 is almost unachievable. And then the building just to the north there that I've got there, 500 square metres, which is around about Firewater 5, is the panel beating workshop that's in there. So again, roughly a representative size. I haven't used the largest building deliberately, but even a small building, given the usage, can be Firewater 5, which again is quite a large amount of water. We're looking at a requirement of around 9,000 litres a minute. So that's where we're sitting there. I do also have an example just quickly of Martinborough, because we have also had issues there. Up until the end of last year, we had an automatic response from Carterton to Martinborough with our water tanker that is based here for any structure fire in the confines of Martinborough town. Because the water supply had issues, we couldn't rely on the water supply to provide us with the water required for any structure fire. I have attended a couple of house fires down there where we did indeed use the tanker to supplant what was being used out of the town's main, because for lack of a better description, the hose was reasonably flaccid, and that was just with one hose string running. So, and that's off the town's main. So it shows you that we don't have a greater supply there. These are two of the larger buildings in the centre of town. So Mitre 10 just on the northern and eastern side there, Firewater 7. And on the sort of more southern and eastern side of the centre of the photograph there, the building has changed a little bit, but unfortunately our aerial mapping hasn't caught up quite yet. But that would be the supermarket. And that's approximately Firewater 6. That building is not sprinklered either. So it may be that people, if this is to go into the plan, that people building buildings may need to consider sprinklers more as an option, because that reduces that firewater level down considerably.
Another really stupid question.
Yep.
If you put sprinklers in a building and it then uses the same water supply, does that make your job even harder though?
Not necessarily, because the way the sprinkler system is designed is that if the town's main supply is not sufficient for the sprinkler system, then the sprinkler system will be required to have a tank and a pump as part of the sprinkler system. So that will be just for the sprinklers. So, for instance, down at Premier Beehive in Carterton here, they have a very large tank on site. They have a very large pump on site, because we don't have the water supply down Morton Road to be able to contain a fire within there, and the water supply doesn't have the ability to supply a sprinkler system of that size. Just to give you an idea, the pump there is sized at about 7,500 litres a minute. That's just for the sprinkler system.
Okay.
Okay.
That's incredibly useful. It's created a few questions in my mind.
You're so brilliant. Fire away.
The question's not so much for you, Mr. Allen, but for the planners. I'm looking at, I've got in front of me is for the centre zone. This is standard number 8 so it's for the town centre zone. The additional wording that's been recommended to be added is where a connection with council's reticulated water supply systems is not sufficient to comply with the NZ Fire Service Firefighting Water Supplies Code of Practice, and on-site firefighting water supply must be provided and accessible in accordance with SNZ, PAS, whatever. So that's the standard.
Correct.
Where that's not met, the application becomes a restricted discretionary application, Mr. McGimsey.
Mhm.
I guess what I'm wondering about is, first and foremost, why this is a district plan matter as opposed to a building consent matter.
Did you
Sorry,
want me to
Mr.
speak to that, Paul, or?
I can have a crack. Sorry, Mr. Chair, just to make sure I understood that correctly, why this is a RMA matter rather than Building
Yes.
Act, was that the question? Yeah. Yep. I do discuss this briefly in my evidence, but also note that Building Act is not something I have particular expertise in as a planner. I do. There is some interface between the Building Act and Resource Management Act matters when it comes to firefighting water supply. And this has been discussed a lot over the years around forums like this. The resource management issue, in my mind, is the provision of firefighting water supply to a site. The Building Act deals with the movement of firefighting water supply within that site. It also covers things like access, but it doesn't in itself ensure that there is adequate firefighting water supply to the site. and it's always been my understanding, and I feel that is the resource management issue. It's a servicing issue, in the same way that wastewater or stormwater is to a site. So where the Building Act may require sprinklers for certain types of development, if there's not adequate water to run those sprinklers, they presumably are not particularly effective.
Did you want to add to that at any way?
I think Mr. McGimpsey's pretty much covered it off.
Okay.
Is that, yeah, the provision of water to the site is where the RMA comes in. The provision of water throughout the building is where the Building Act comes in, and that's where there's an interface between the two. And sometimes this is where we find issues where resource consents are issued for buildings where and we find this in other jurisdictions where we do have the code of practice already in a plan. However, we're not consulted early enough. Sometimes we find, or the provisions are ignored, and we get to a position where a building is then built, which is compliant with the Building Act. However, in terms of firefighting water supply, we're woefully deficient, and essentially we're then limited to protecting the exposures around the building and letting the building burn.
Thank you for that. Second question is in relation to the material you supplied in relation to the main townships within the Wairarapa. It seems to me that for any larger buildings, the ability to achieve the fire water rating is going to be very constrained.
Correct.
And if this clause that I read out earlier is to be applied, activities that are purported to be, buildings and activities that are purported to be permitted will actually need a resource consent.
Most likely. One thing I would say, just obviously the constraints of the water supplies and things like that, is the firefighting water supply code of practice does allow for, say, a development. So if we were to skip back to Wairarapa, just to use this as a bit of an exemplar, the pond at the top there most likely would have sufficient water supply for the majority of buildings in that area if it were to be used as the firefighting water supply for that area. So if it were piped and pumped around that area, that would be sufficient for that area to cover off the majority of buildings in that area. So we wouldn't necessarily require every single building in that area to have a firefighting water supply of its own to protect its own building. What you could consider within the development is to ensure that the firefighting water supply is there to cover the entire development that would cover the greatest risk.
I understand what you're saying. Notwithstanding that, that's not the way the standard is written. It talks about an on-site firefighting water supply must be provided.
Yeah, so
that would qualify as an on-site.
We can consider it as an alternative supply. So we do have alternatives where we will allow, I'm just trying to find the correct diagram there. So this one here, the hard stand, etc. The distance that we'll generally allow between, say, tankage and parking the fire truck is around about 90 metres. However, we do have ability within the standard for our region managers to approve exemptions within that. So, but we can and will work with.
No, I understand that. Again, that's the problem there, Mr. Allen, is we're dealing with a standard that's standard on permitted activity. So it needs to be clear, unequivocal, and not subject to any discretion. And so, not saying that it's inappropriate, but the way the wording is currently, I'm inviting the officers and Mr. McGimpsey and officer yourself to perhaps have another think about how that intention is best delivered. There's two ways of dealing with it. Could split the wording up so that the connection must be sufficient to comply with the standard, and then have the ability to consider alternative arrangements through a consenting process as opposed to a permitted activity process. I'm not advocating for that approach necessarily, but that's just one way of dealing with it. But this is a bigger issue, I think, than the panel realised yesterday. in terms of the ability, its potential to constrain permitted activities throughout the zones.
Yeah, we do acknowledge that obviously including the firefighting water supplies within the district plan could potentially constrain some activities. However, we do believe that it is needed for the betterment of the community and anyone that is using any of these buildings, because and for our firefighters for that matter, because if our firefighters come to a building fire and they don't have the ability to extinguish it, then we potentially are going to end up with people getting hurt.
Yes.
Or worse, where we're trying to do things that we would not otherwise do if we had the water supply that we needed.
Okay. The panel's not indicating that the issue is not important, it's critical. Just that how it's delivered in the district plan, I think, needs some finessing.
Yeah, and I think that's probably Mr. McGimpsey needs to help us finesse that a little bit in the offices. That's sort of a little bit outside of my bailiwick, so to speak.
Yes, and just to clarify, very happy to do that, Mr. Chair, with the officers. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, well, question is whether we need to provide any direction on that. The panel will have a think about that and let the officers know they can be in touch as to what we need discussed in the timeframe for that. Was there anything else? We have the next submitter available, but we may actually take an after tea adjournment and come back. So unless there's anything else.
Not from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gumpy. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
We will take an after tea adjournment at 3 o'clock. For Miss Levinson, you're online?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Miss Levinson. Would you indulge us in a 10 to 15-minute break and we'll come back around 3:15?
Of course, talk to you then.
Thank you.